33 days, 13 house guests, 5 invaders, and 1 podcast. This is Isolated Invasion, and I'm Poody, also known as Big Brother Delta. Today we're joined by Reem and Haleigh, our alumni for Isolated Invasion.
Hey.
Hello.
So today we're going to be talking about your journey through Isolated. I think one of the biggest ups and downs we've had, certainly in Isolated so far, maybe in Stranded. I don't know. I want to get your perspective because we've talked enough shit about you guys. So now it's your turn to defend yourselves and return fire on us. I guess first let's talk about your friendship and where that started. I guess Reem, will start with you.
Okay, so when I entered the house, like immediately Gary and Flick were on the block, and everyone talked to me about like, oh, there's so much drama, whatever. And then it kind of just died down once Gary got voted out. And I really felt like we were going to be pagonged, the invaders would. So I was talking to Michelle and Courtney and was like, we have to find some sort of in with people. And Haleigh was awake really late at night, and I'm a night owl. So I started talking to her, and the way she talked to me was very reminiscent about like how I talk to people. And I even remember talking to Michelle like the next day, like, hey, I think we found our in with Haleigh, but I don't know if we can trust her. And Michelle was like, yeah, you know, she's really open and stuff, and I think we can trust her. And I was like, yeah, but so am I. And the only person who can trust me is you. And it just kind of went up from there. Like I started showing Haleigh about the boards and how to find things, kind of helped her with some of the challenges that may or may not show up. And we just had really good conversations. Like our conversations were probably the best flowing, at least from my side. And I never like experienced any disconnect with Haleigh.
Yeah, no, I felt the same way. I mean, at first I started talking to Reem because I knew from watching Big Brother, I needed to get good with invaders because I knew that everything would die down. Some people would target them, but the people who would work with them would get far. That's always how this works in Big Brother. So it was at first like really just strategy. And I did find it was easy to talk to Reem, but I did not trust her at all at first. Like you can even look back at my DRs and I was very skeptical of her, even after we started like our alliance, just because she was so open with her game and how she played it and how she mentioned how in Stranded that she would take people far and then cut them whenever she didn't need them. So I was worried that she was going to do that to me. But after she started helping me with, future challenges and giving me lots of info and telling me about her like alliance with Annie Winston, I was like, this is definitely someone I can see myself going far with.
Yeah, because Haleigh, you were kind of the most social of the original house guests. And so when you and Reem kind of teamed up, I don't know if anyone stood a chance socially, just from the amount of conversations you all had with everyone. But you also kind of helped bridge that gap between Reem and the other house guests.
Yeah, it was not as difficult as I thought it would be, because I think a lot of, at least JC and Scotty, were definitely skeptical of them, but kind of were on the same page with me, where they knew that we needed to grab them before anyone else did. So I think I was definitely just in that because me and Courtney already had like a good relationship. Like I think at that point we might have already like made like a final 2. And then Reem and I had one. I wasn't super close to Michelle, but I knew if Reem trusted me, Michelle would because they were close. So all I needed was to convince Scotty and JC to get with them and, put this alliance together. But throughout the whole game, that was kind of the hardest thing because even when we were starting this alliance, JC and Scotty were like, we need to pull someone else in. So if they ever turn on us, we will have numbers and we can get them out easily. And that was kind of the whole game that I'm just stuck in the middle the entire time, trying to make sure that both of the sides didn't turn on each other and kind of trying to decide if they ever did, which one I would stay with. And that definitely changed as the game went on. So yeah, that was kind of the hardest thing, kind of keeping Reem at bay from going at JC or Scotty or keeping them from being suspicious of them and kind of, squashing any rumors they heard, even if they were true.
Yeah, Reem, you came into the game with Michelle as your number one, obviously. And then once you lost her, did Haleigh kind of step into that role for you of like your...
So when Michelle was in the game, I think I put a ranking in my DR, but Michelle was number 1 always. I was going to go final 2 with her. Like, I love her. That bitch is amazing. She helped me, during a personal crisis. Like, she's one of my best friends. And when she left, I knew, like, just the way I play in general, I have to have somebody even me out. And unfortunately, in the beginning of the game with the first head of household, I think Michelle being being on vacation and stuff, like, she just kind of gave me the rein. And I shouldn't have that unless I have someone to offset me. It's why Susie and I worked really well together. She was able to break things down for me and keep me level. And when Michelle left, I didn't really have anybody except Haleigh, because Haleigh was number 2 in my ranking. So she obviously just moved right into that spot.
So let's talk about the early game for you, because before you came into the house, I would say I don't think your HOH reign went super well, although you seem to think it did initially.
Yeah, yep.
What was the plan with you and Michelle? Because initially you guys nominated Courtney, and then Michelle played the veto on Courtney, and you nominated Gary in her place. Was that like initially the plan, or did you guys like change course after you nominated Courtney?
Well, for me, the original plan, because I wasn't expecting Michelle to win the challenge. Michelle is notorious for not exactly winning challenges. So I was expecting to win that challenge, and obviously did not go my way because it took me like almost an hour. But I felt like if Gary had won, or obviously if Flick or somebody had won, I really felt like Gary was going to take somebody off and I would be forced to put Michelle up. So best case scenario was me or Michelle winning that veto. And when she ended up winning it, we talked about what to do. And I felt like if she took Courtney off, she would have Courtney as a shield. And obviously they're 2 winners. Courtney would have trust in Michelle. Maybe if we go into the house, I could play up this thing like Michelle went against my wishes, like all this stuff. And Flick had already started that narrative in the Invader house by saying, I got betrayed and all this stuff. So I was hoping we could leverage that into making inroads so Michelle and I could be almost opposite in the house, because we worked really well that way. Turned out we really didn't need it, but yeah, it was really convoluted.
Haleigh, when Reem and all the invaders entered, obviously you guys took Flick's side. Were you a big part of that decision? Because I know that you had a lot of inroads with the original house guests.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I was kind of more at that point going with the group, but it was working in my favor because I was talking to Scotty before they came in. After it was like the first or second HOH, the first HOH where we saw the rankings that they ranked each other, and immediately when I saw who was up and who were being able to vote out before they came in to talk to us, I knew I wanted Gary out. I had no idea what his relationships were in the house, but he was just ranked higher in trustworthiness, higher in competitions, and like likability, whereas Flick was lower on all of those and seemed like less of a game threat moving forward and maybe someone that I could use to my advantage. So when Flick came in, with all the dramatics, I was like, perfect. We get to keep a target and also someone who may not bode well in the game farther on. So yeah, but I wasn't even really the one who was making that decision. Honestly, people came to me first. I think it was like Annie and Winston were both like, hey, we want to vote out Gary, you down. And I'm like, yep, it works for me. So I didn't even have to fight for that.
Right. At what point did you guys form a very close alliance with Courtney? I would say there was some kind of Spice Girls alliance at some point with JC and Scotty, I believe. Yeah. But at what point did you 3 decide that like this is who I'm going to try to get to the end with?
I think for me, like I guess it really wasn't a final 2 with Courtney, but obviously being invaders, we had already been close, and Courtney kind of buried the hatchet a bit with me from when I nommed her, especially after Michelle left. And Haleigh, I think at the time already had an alliance with Courtney, and I think it was just a way to bridge that gap. And we just all 3 worked really well together in general. Like we all had our own like strengths and stuff, and we just kind of evened each other out amongst the game.
Yeah. Around the time where Reem and I were becoming friends, I think a little bit earlier in that day, Courtney and I had already been talking and kind of solidified that we wanted to move forward in the game. So when Reem and I came together, it kind of it made sense. And then as the game moved on, Scotty kind of just became sketchy to us. It just made it easier to solidify that. But I always thought that Courtney and Reem were much, much closer, that they were leading on. Like I thought Courtney being mad at her coming into the house was kind of a ruse, especially because Michelle pulled her off. I thought it was a plan from the beginning. So it's funny to hear that like you ranked me higher than her, just because I always thought, you always said that you wouldn't take Courtney, but in my mind I was like, if we got like final 3, you won, you would take Courtney.
Yeah, I definitely played this game differently than I've played my past games. And I was extremely open with you about my game. So I don't know if you went back to read like the DRs, but there was one conversation we had, and I told you that I planned to piss off every single person in the house. And I wanted the votes to go to somebody I thought deserved it. So I had every intention of taking you to the finals if I had the choice.
So I would say between that infamous fast forward downfall and when you guys kind of came together, you really kind of dominated the game strategically to where none of you guys were nominated. I think maybe Courtney was once up until that point. What would you say was like your biggest hurdle in the way of completely dominating the game exactly how you wanted it?
For me, I think it definitely, I don't know. It was just this weird dynamic when I went into the house. Like at the reunion, Levita kind of cleared the air a little bit, but like I felt like I had been shut out. And apparently that was like the social game of the house cats from the get-go. Like I wasn't shut out. It was just how they did things. And I found it pretty hard to find footing. And obviously I did find Haleigh, so I gained footing in that way. But I had to learn almost how to be like a back driver because I wasn't in power at all, with the exception of that first HOH and then that second one where Flick went home. And usually that's not the case for me. Usually I'm targeted all the time. I'm usually the one dominating my alliance, and that definitely wasn't the case in this game. And I think it was really just those social dynamics of those house guests when we entered, because the invaders were a minority going in.
Right. Haleigh, what did you learn from Reem and Courtney about how to play the game? And do you think that had a big influence on your game overall?
Yeah, I think it really did. I think the biggest thing that they kind of provided me was that when you trust someone, you should just tell them literally everything, because it's so easy for other people to use information against you and to create paranoia and kind of, break into those strong bonds, as you could see, like with, I know most other people. So even when, we would kind of use each other's names as leverage or, make like side alliances, we would always tell each other what was going on. I think that taught me the most, and that's kind of how I played my game. I just decided to put all my trust into my alliance and the people in it. Specifically, JC and Reem, I think, were my top 2 the entire time, just because I never really knew where Courtney's head was at the entire time, and I thought that she trusted Reem more than me. So yeah, I feel like just the loyalty in that, because I wanted to come in playing more of like a cutthroat, use people as a means to an end, which I kind of did later on. But I was surprised that my loyalty to my alliance was as strong as it was.
I guess I'll go off of that. Reem, did Michelle's departure influence your overall rivalry with Winston, or was that natural because of his veto wins?
No, it was it was absolutely Michelle's departure. I mean, yeah, obviously from a strategic standpoint, like he did keep winning, so it did make it easy to target him for that reason. But when Michelle left, I had this cutthroat thing where it was like, Winston already told me I'm his favorite invader. Like, I want to throw up. I'm going to get as close to him as possible. So when I destroy him, it's going to hurt just as bad as it hurt when Michelle left.
Yeah.
And it definitely influenced me. Not for the good either.
Well, it's hard because in real life, I think that this happens all the time. I wouldn't call it bullying. I would say naturally, I think people bond and then they vilify someone else, right? Because it's easier to bond with people over an outside enemy, quote unquote. And you don't often get that perspective of being able to look back and be like, you know what, I was wrong in that situation.
Yeah.
And, we're never in this bubble where we get to look back and see everything that happened. So I guess my question is, now having looked back at everything that's happened, did you learn anything about how you perceive situations, or was this just like a huge misunderstanding?
I think it was definitely a misunderstanding. And I do think the host handled the whole situation correctly. Because obviously, if that hadn't have happened, and you guys did tell me from the get-go, like, hey, this isn't what happened, whatever, the game would have been an entirely different game. And I do think that you guys handled it properly. But yeah, it was completely unwarranted, my revenge on him. I still stand by my comments of him being robotic. Obviously now I know why that kind of comes off, just from the server and stuff. I mean, he's a good guy, but my revenge on him was completely unwarranted. But I do think in this game in particular, my perceptions were off probably about 75% anyway. And it's probably because of how uncontrollable my life is currently, my personal life. So, I mean, I guess it's a little bit of both. I realize if I'm level in real life, I can think a lot clearer.
Well, I think, too, a big part of that was that you did not have Michelle.
Yeah.
Not only did the Winston thing stem from Michelle, but also in her season, in your original season, Michelle had a pretty uncanny ability to see what was going on.
Right.
Yeah, read a situation where she was able to like see an outside alliance versus an inside alliance.
Right.
And I think without that, you were kind of just a cannon without anyone steering the ship,
Exactly. Like I said before, I always have to find somebody who levels me out. Like, I understand my social game is great. I am decent in challenges, but I have to have somebody who can read things and keep me at bay. And in my season, I had Susie, and then I latched to Michelle, and Michelle was super great at that. And when she came into the game in this one, her headspace wasn't in the game. And then obviously her departure, like I didn't have that strategic arm for me. So it was just like, okay, I'm going to go rogue.
Yeah. And we'll talk about the Meltdown TM in a little while. But I also want to get into a little bit of your headspace, because I know like not even a week ago, you were not in a good situation health-wise. So I could imagine as you march towards the end of the season, I would think your health was starting to deteriorate a little bit, along with like fatigue of the game.
Yeah,
do you think
I definitely think my mental health and my physical health during the game, because when it first started, I had just come off of my mental breakdown. I lost my job like the day that the game started. And I was like, okay, like I'm going to focus on this game. I'm going to play to win, like all this stuff. And then I started losing weight like super rapidly and like just crazy crap. And by the time my birthday started rolling around, like I just wasn't in a good place at all anyway. And my birthday was like the day after the meltdown, which is super appropriate. And yeah, I definitely think all of that affected me more than I thought it would. Actually, Levita gave me a pretty good insight. Like I basically self-sabotaged myself. And I think that I maybe did it on purpose, more of a let me control when I lose because I have no control in my life kind of deal. And I thought that was super clear. Like, oh my God, it was like fucking mind blowing when she said that. I was like, holy shit. That makes complete sense because I lost all control in my life when the game started. And then obviously it went into the game with my gameplay.
Well, I think you're someone who likes to be in control, not only in your job, probably in your household, and also in Stranded too. In your season, you were kind of in control of a lot of the goings on. And honestly, I don't think, even in the podcast we were talking about how cringe everything was. It's not like you were playing a bad game. To make Final 6 without being nominated once, I think is shocking in itself, considering how much control you had over the season.
Yeah, I made it a lot farther than I thought I would. I thought I was going to be like my placement of careers, like 9 to possibly 7. I was not expecting 6 at all.
I don't even know, like, if you were to do it over again, if having a different strategy would be beneficial to you. Like, I kind of think that might be your sweet spot, Well,
I was given some awesome critique by my mother, org mother, and she also dragged a little bit of my game. But her advice,
about Haleigh, correct?
Yes, Haleigh. She did drag me a little bit, but she gave me some awesome critique and some good advice that I think I'm going to take into the next game, and I think I'll do much better. Maybe not better than 6, but maybe I'll play a game that I'll feel better about, because my reads were so bad. So bad this game. Like, I should have kept Scotty. And the whole time I thought JC was just dumb and Scotty was the one that was sketchy, when really Scotty was the most loyal out of everybody. He trusted us. And I was like, well, nope, Scotty's got to go. And had Scotty stayed in the game, I think that me and Haleigh would have been in the final 2 and Haleigh would have taken win.
I guess I'll ask Haleigh about that weekend, the meltdown. How big was your game influenced by Reem, especially because I know at some point you joined in on that meltdown weekend where you guys were creating all the threads. Specifically, you guys had like a joint confessional. Were you aware of how big of an influence Reem was having on your game? Or was this just like you thought you had lost, so you might as well have some fun on the way out? Like what were you thinking during that?
Oh, no, I was always very aware how big of an influence Reem had in my game. And I thought that Reem was using that as a tactic as well. Like, I was aware that stuff was going on in her life, but I didn't understand like the full extent, because I feel like the whole entire time, I mentioned this before, like I was pretty removed from everything, even though like I had stuff going on in my life as well, but I kind of just saw this as like this is a game, I will do anything to. And I think that I saw Reem as playing that way as well. And so that's why I was like, cool, I have this opportunity to change how people see me in this game. And I wanted to take it regardless. And I even said this in my DR. Some of it, was frustration of JC kind of blowing everything up. And then Winston kind of being Reem's downfall after this like whole, big like a rivalry almost that she had with him the entire time. I kind of wanted to use it as Reem's going off. I can use this to my advantage. I know she was going to go home regardless. Everyone already told me, unless like I did something super egregious or crazy, I knew that I was safe that week. And so I was like, right now, I've been told I'm going home next. And if people in the jury and just people in general are like, oh, Haleig's so nice, we love Haleigh, a great player, great social game, whatever, then I'm going to be seen as a big threat moving forward. No one's going to want to take me to the end, because they know that people in the jury at that point, except for Flick, I feel like were on my side. So I was like, my biggest reasons for kind of joining in, and all my roasts too were like, I feel like they weren't even that clever. I was just honestly trying to get a stir out of people. So one, people would dislike my posts and dislike things. So I could use that to my advantage and be like, this is why you should take me to the end. No one will vote for me. And then I could use that at the end and try to spin it. Obviously, I don't know if I made it to the end, if I could have even spun that, because it worked a little too well. And people got a little too, even looking back, like kind of coming into jury, I was like, oh, I kind of regret doing that. I mean, especially with the whole Annie thing and, feeling like I exposed her in some way, like that obviously made me feel terrible. But like looking back on it, I don't know if I would have gotten as far as I would. I don't know if JC would have kept me over Courtney or not, but I don't know. Maybe you guys have more insight to that.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into the very end game, because I think that's where like a lot of your game came out. I think even for me, during the podcast, I was a vocal critic when everyone else was definitely Team Haleigh. But I think like during that end game, it really showed how well your social game had worked up until that point. Specifically, JC choosing to keep you through to the final 3.
Yeah.
I think really he almost jeopardized his game entirely. Fortunately, he was able to take you out at final 3. But had he not, I think you win up against JC even.
Yeah, the whole thing was crazy. After winning the HOH, after Reem left, that really gave me time to do some damage control with everyone and kind of explain more to everyone why that happened. So that was honestly a blessing that I won. I honestly just got lucky with that HOH and that I knew how to do it. And then same with the veto as well. And I knew out of everyone left in the game at that point, Winston 100% would never, ever, ever keep me. Even earlier in the game, Winston was saying how, like, to my face, he would say, I think you're going to win. You are a huge threat. No one's ever talking about you throwing your name out. Everyone likes you. And even at the end, he was like, I know that you have the best shot against me, which I did not agree with at all. Everyone was Winston's, and I knew that. And that's why when I won the veto, I knew I had to send him home. But I think that week really gave me some damage control with JC. And I ended up being like, I was kind of feeling betrayed in the moment, but I think we can move forward from this. Like, I'm still down to work together. And I didn't really mean it, but he definitely believed it. So then when it came down to the final 4, and I somehow convinced Matt not to nominate me, that was like my biggest thing. Me and JC already were at a really, really good point as to where he trusted me again. And I think if I was on the block, one, I think I would have gone home if I didn't win that HOH, but also I don't think I would have had that good of leverage to get him back in his good graces. He might have thought that I was throwing competitions, and that's why all of a sudden, which I wasn't, I just which just was really incompetent sometimes. But I think he was also really, really convinced that I had a good chance of winning the veto. And so those 2 competition wins kind of got him scared and kind of showed me as more of a threat and gave me the leverage into making that handshake deal with him that I honestly didn't think he was going to keep, because I had zero intention of keeping that.
I was going to say, was that surprising to you?
Oh, I was shocked that he kept me. I think he kept me, one, because he knew that Matt was going to take Courtney, but also because I think he thought that if he didn't, that he wouldn't have gotten my vote at the end, which I think he still would have. I think I really respected his game the entire, even when he betrayed me, I was like, I respect that move. That was a good one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was really shocked. I definitely would have kept Courtney over him, no doubt. So yeah, and then final 3 with the HOH competition, he beat me by 9, which was, oh my gosh, devastating, because I knew I needed to win that, because if I got to the end, I think I could have won that competition, because I watched Big Brother so much. I've talked to these people so much, and I've talked to everyone extensively. There wasn't anyone in the house that I didn't talk to, other than maybe Brett and like Monet, a little bit as well. But we had our nice little fight thing that was fun. But yeah, so I knew if I made it to that final HOH challenge, I had a good shot, because I knew how people talked and I knew how people phrased things. So yeah, I mean, I think that's how I saw the end game.
And you were among Courtney and Reem, you were the one who voted for JC to win. So obviously you didn't have too many bad feelings towards him.
Yeah, I mean, the entire time, honestly, people kind of probably got tired of me being like, it's just a game. It's just a game. And I mean, I was thinking that the entire time, even when people were coming at me, like when Flick was insulting me, I found it funny, just because the dramatics of it. So that's why I was so shocked that it wasn't just a game for many amount of people playing. I really respected both Matt's and JC's game. I think they both were deserving to be there. But I think being with JC the entire time and seeing all the work he was putting in, and the fact that he honestly did carry our alliance with Scotty, there was no situation that I couldn't see not voting for him. I think I would have even voted for him against Winston, but who knows?
Yeah. And I do think the line between personal and game kind of blurs too, because I mean, as you saw in the game, a lot of people take it personally, but I think when you're playing a game based off of tricking people and using people's emotions, I do think that it can kind of cross into it. And specifically in these games, because they're so intense, you're talking to people sometimes 8 hours a day, for 30 days, you can form pretty close bonds that way. But I do think in some instances, I kind of think, I may be wrong on this, but I thought the jury situation, I thought that was a little over the top. I kind of think Annie and Kristen might have just been lashing out at the person that they could easiest, at that point. I mean, I don't want to minimize any feelings she might have had about feeling exposed or anything like that. But I do think, if anything, Zingbot and the host probably exposed her, I would say, a flirt mance with Winston. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. So I could definitely see where you wouldn't have thought that in the game.
Oh, yeah. Imagine my shot coming in. I was also...
I just wanted to defend you a little bit on that one, because we were a little shocked. I don't know. I would be interested to hear from Kristen and Annie now, how much of that was legitimate and how much of that was anger about the game overall.
Yeah, I definitely think, I mean, at the reunion, they both were like, it's all good. So obviously, I don't think it was as big of a deal as it seemed in the moment. I was actually surprised that Kristen started coming for me, because I had not really done anything to her. And I knew that her and Annie kind of had their kind of so when she started coming for me too, I was like, why is the whole house against me? I thought that my interpretation of my game was completely off at that point, and then seen as this villain this entire time, which I guess maybe to an extent I kind of was. But yeah, no, that was just as shocking, I bet, for me that it was for everyone.
Well, and I think jury's a cathartic experience, because you get to unleash a little bit of the frustration you've had all season. I always say the jury, although it's one of the more venomous parts of a season, is probably the most therapeutic, because you kind of get to leave it all out there, at least for the players that are in jury, and kind of let the game go a little bit. I guess let's talk to Reem a little bit more. Reem, so at what point did the Meltdown weekend, like, honestly, I think a lot of it, if that had been Winston railing against you guys, I don't think anyone would have viewed that negatively. You know, I think a lot of it had to do with like you guys being in power at that point and this being like your first time out of power. So that probably wasn't a good look. But I don't want to like diminish the fact that it's a legitimate thing that people have meltdown threads. I think even throughout the season, we saw Flick have some threads. Rachel had a thread on her way out. So yeah, it's not like it was a first stranded or isolated.
Right.
But at the same time, I think the other part about that was shocking was that nobody had been nominated at that point. Obviously, you knew you were going to be at least nominated, but you could have survived that week. Was it just a matter of, you know, you had lost the control and you were at such a vulnerable stage where any loss of control was going to be an issue for you? Or were you at that point just like...
I think it was a mixture. I had gotten increasingly frustrated with the game, like over that period of time. And I mean, obviously these people are actually decent, but in the game, like I don't know, it felt like I was pulling teeth to talk to most of them, which is why I latched to Haleigh so much because our conversation did flow. Mm-hmm. And I was just so frustrated in general. And I had already had this plan to have a blow up at some point. And at that particular moment, the nominations weren't solid yet. So I was like, you know what? My birthday is tomorrow. I'm going to liberate myself. And I knew that the people on the jury and the people in the game, they didn't know really what I felt because my social game's pretty good. And it's obviously like a one-sided relationship where these people do like me, but I didn't like. So I was like, okay, if I do this, maybe, just maybe, me or Haleigh will be taken off. It'll be JC, will control the votes, like whatever. And maybe someone will drag me. And it'll be somebody at the end, like I'll win a challenge and maybe Haleigh can be sitting there with me. But more than anything, it was just like this liberating sense of like, I'm just going to tell these people what I have felt this entire fucking game. And, right. I don't know. I think it was a mixture of everything. Like I did lose control. I knew that if I didn't win veto, I was going to be gone. And even if I didn't have the blow up, the next time, if I didn't win HOH, I was going to be gone. Like it would just be this constant thing. Right. And I was just really tired.
Right. Because I mean, like on some aspects, I do want to give you and Haleigh the benefit of the doubt of, you know, maybe you were vilifying yourself to get to the end. But I think general consensus at the time between hosts was like, this is a bad move. They're all shitting away their games at this point, which probably is not necessarily true. There's a long time between final 6 and the final 2.
Yeah, for me, I felt like my game was already going to be on if I was nominated. Like I would just be an easy nom every single time. Mm-hmm. And I had already been like labeled most likely to win, which is like fucking kiss of death. And I was like, all right, fuck it. Like I have nothing to lose, like at all. So I'm going to leave all my shit out on the table and they can hate me. They don't have like, or they can like me. I really don't. Yep. And it was my birthday.
I want to say first off, like you were definitely the central point of the season in terms of drama and the driving force of a lot of like the storylines of the season. If we're looking at the season as a story. So with that being said, you knew the dragging was coming. You had like a little bit of a notion that was going to happen. It's pretty rare that we have a character who is like universally the favorite going into a season and then immediately does a 180 on us and becomes like the villain of a season. And I mean, you know, technically you were a villain in Coral Islands, but more of like a Russell Hand situation where we were kind of rooting for you.
I was loved when I left Koreals, and I knew in this one I would not be.
Yeah, you were like a true villain in this one. You were like an Eric villain. Yeah. How was that for you to like handle after the season? Like, was that hard to see a lot of the hosts shitting on your game that I'm sure you didn't think was that bad at the time?
No, because when I got to the jury and like I slept and stuff, like I had time to like reflect on things. And even during the season, there were points where I was like, you know, that wasn't really that great of a move, but whatever. Like I'm in too deep at this point. So like I knew it would happen, and I knew that I had over exaggerated myself like all season. Like I don't know, like I lost a semblance of myself during like the last couple of months, and I guess I was holding on to whatever. So I was expecting it, and I think expecting it, like if I wasn't expecting it, it probably would have been hard. Right. But I felt like everything was legitimate that you guys said. So I mean, it wasn't like how do you take that wrong? You know what I mean? If it's real, then it's real.
Well, I want to say commend you for taking it well, because we've had situations where people have not taken that news well, that they were not the favorite.
I will say that I was actually disappointed in some of the dragging because, like, you guys made that group chat thing with me, and I was like, okay, so awesome. It's actually going to be, like, rough. And then, like, oh, this is all legitimate. Okay. So I was, like, partially disappointed.
Well, I think, we tried to keep a lot of the dragging, like, private between hosts, especially because I knew a lot of the lurkers were your close friends, too. So we want to be respectful of that. But also, we all understand, like, from season to season, it's different. Even in Kuril Islands, where you had Chris and Eric, we understood that it's situational, right? So, like, this season, it was easy to root for Winston because he was on the outs. But let's say he was in control the whole season, I don't think he would have been as likable of a character.
Right.
So it just, from season to season, someone can change depending on how that season turns out, who else is playing the season, and your mindset going into the season. So, take that with a grain of salt. But
no, I think it's completely legitimate because, I mean, let's take Winston, for example. Had the whole situation with Michelle happened, or if you guys had told me from the get-go, like, this isn't what happened, he probably wouldn't have been the hero of the season, right? Sure. I don't really know who it would be, but there wouldn't be that revenge arc from me, this unwarranted revenge, had those things not happened.
Right.
So, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think every season is different and every story arc changes every season.
Right. Let's try to wrap it up in a nice bow. If you had to give someone advice going forward, let's say even give yourself advice going forward, what would that be?
For me, it would be to play to get to the end. Don't play to win. Just play to get to the end. It doesn't matter who you're sitting.
Haleigh, what would your advice as a new player, having just experienced all this, what would your advice be to another new player going in?
I would say to take it day by day, never count yourself out. But also, I feel like my biggest mistake was hating my kind of floater-ish game, even though it worked for me and got me far. And I think I was too hard on myself. So don't be too hard on yourself.
Do you guys have any questions for each other I'm sure you guys have talked a lot since then, but.
I don't know. Haleigh, when are we going to riot in the
we already started that. We'll have a reunion later. Maybe rematch if we go to that.
Perfect.
Do you guys have any final thoughts that we didn't cover? Anything you wanted to get out there?
Thank you for letting me play.
Of course.
Yeah, no, same. Yeah, that's honestly all I want to say. This was an awesome experience, and I had a great time playing. And thank you for not skipping over my application.
I think it showed how much you guys enjoyed the experience and really took advantage of it, at least socially. I think you guys killed it. So congrats on a good season. Even though you may not have been given the hero arc, I still think, what good is a hero without a good villain, right?
Oh my God, I thought I was the hero for like 6 rounds.
That's what you have to, a good villain thinks that they're the hero, right? Every villain thinks they're the hero of their own story, but
Like, it wasn't until I did the meltdown that I was like, oh, I'm going to be the villain.
No, I think, for me, I've said it multiple times. This was my favorite season. And I think you guys are a huge part of why it's one of my favorite seasons, along with Winston and a lot of the other new players and returning players. But I just think you guys gave it your all and left it out on the field, so to speak. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
I think that's all I have. That's all the questions I had. So with that, I think I'll close it out. This is Poody. Bye.